You stand at a crossroads as dusk softens the edges of a town you have walked all your life. The ledger you carry is old leather, its corners softened by hands that counted pennies and prayers in equal measure. Inside are columns not only of numbers but of sentences whispered at kitchens and on porches. Don't risk it, save every cent, don't talk about money, be thankful for what you have. Those margins are crowded with inherited lines, scarcity as scripture, shame as instruction. You run your thumb over a smudge of ink and hear the echo of a mother closing the pantry door, a grandfather muttering about debts, a voice that made prudence into fear. The air changes. It is not thunder, but the hush before an honest voice enters a room. It comes not as accusation but as a neighborly knock, soft, steady, familiar because it knows the shape of your doubts. You were given a capacity for far more than survival, the voice says, and it is a voice that feels like sunlight sliding between blinds. You almost laugh at hearing something so kind, almost, because the ledger pulls you toward the old stories. The voice continues, naming what you have named only in private, the relief at small security, the secret shame of wanting more, the ways generosity felt dangerous when scarcity lived at the table. Around you, details settle into clarity, the cracked paint on the crossroads sign, the faint smell of coffee from a house 2 doors down, the way your hands tremble when you think of investing in yourself. The voice of God does not berate, it rereads the ledger with new eyes. Risk does not mean recklessness, it says. Money can be a tool for service. Worth is not measured by balance sheets. Each sentence is a gentle scalpel, separating the habit from the heart. You find yourself answering aloud, tentative, then firmer, testing the possibility that your worth predates your finances. A truth begins to rise like dawn, these patterns were passed down to protect, not to imprison. Forgiveness comes easily for those who meant well, and suddenly the ledger feels less like chains and more like a map that can be redrawn. Still, as the light lengthens, doubt stirs, family expectations, the comfortable pull of what you already know. You sense the struggle gathering on the other side of this hush, the questions that will demand action. If this touches you, stay with it, like, subscribe, and ring the bell to walk the next steps, where the wrestling begins and choices turn into change. The kitchen light is low, the ledger lies open like a map of old wounds. You run a thumb over columns of small denials, do not invest, never show wealth, hide mistakes, each notation a whisper passed down across dinner tables and worn hands. Outside, rain drums a steady rhythm against the window, and in that drumbeat your thoughts drum back, what if I fail? What if I bring shame? Your pulse answers with the caution you learned before you learned your name. A knock at the door, your sister's laugh, your father's voice from the hall, be careful with that idea. We did fine by keeping our heads down. You smile, nod, and feel the ledger's gravity press you to agree. The room smells of coffee and the familiar ache of compromise. You try a small test, opening a savings account online, and your chest tightens as if the house itself expects you to retreat. Then the voice arrives, soft as linen, clear as spring water. What if your worth is not measured by what you keep, but by what you give? It is not accusation, it is an invitation. You startle, almost drop the pen. The voice does not erase the fear but reframes it, money as a tool, not a verdict. Risk, it says, is the language of growth. Begin with a step so small it feels safe. Practice disciplined generosity. Forgive the hands that taught you scarcity, they were protecting you, not defining you. You remember your grandmother hiding cash in a Bible, your aunt scolding extravagance, your own first shameful lie about a late bill. The memories sharpen, but the voice weaves them into a larger tapestry, a lineage of care, imperfect and fearful. Name each fear, it counsels. Then make one counter-decision. You write down one fear, not enough, and underneath, one action, automate $25 to savings, give $5 to someone in need, say no to one needless purchase. The ledger begins to tilt. Doubt screams that these steps are trivial. The voice leans closer, they are disciplines that rewire your muscle for abundance. You see, in a moment of surprising clarity, the ledger becoming a ledger of choices, not curses. The house exhales with you. If this reaches you, let it be a promise, stay with these small acts, and they will gather into courage. Like the quiet breath before you step, allow yourself to feel the pull. Subscribe, ring the bell, there is a harder question waiting. Which risk will you take first? Night had settled into the kitchen, the only light a single lamp that threw the ledger's columns into sharp relief. You run your fingers over the ink, tallies of fear, margins annotated with excuses, and the house hums with the memory of a mother's cautionary phrase and a grandfather's clipped thrift. A voice, gentle and unhurried, slides into the room like warm air. You learn to protect, it says. But protection became prison. It is not accusation, it is counsel. You startle, whisper back, but what if I lose everything? The voice answers not with a promise of windfalls but with a new lens. Risk is a teacher. Stewardship is courageous. The scene shifts to a Sunday afternoon at your parents' table. Conversation is soft and patterned. We never had more than enough, your sister murmurs, as if reciting a family creed. You feel the old pull toward agreement, toward diminishing your desires so the lineage remains comfortable. The voice threads through the chat, almost a breath. What would you build if scarcity were not a law? You taste something foreign, permission, and it unsettles you with light. You begin to rehearse different sentences aloud, as if practicing a foreign language. Money is a tool for service, you say into the mirror. The reflection listens. The ledger on the counter becomes less like a verdict and more like a map. Take small calculated steps, set aside generosity as a non-negotiable, name one risk you can embrace this month. The voice advises discipline, not drama. Give first, it counsels, then hold, then invest. Let generosity loosen fear's grip. There are moments of shame, old stories flare, a cousin's dismissal, a bank notice, but the voice asks for reconciliation rather than erasure. Forgive the hands that tightened your purse. You are not their debt. Under that benediction you breathe a forgiveness that feels like removing weights from your chest. You schedule the first tiny act of courage, a call to negotiate, an enrollment in a course, a modest investment. The ledger's ink still shows, but your pen hovers, ready to write a different line. As doubt and resolve contend, the room tilts toward possibility. The voice promises guidance, practical habits woven into faith, and you realize the next message will not be abstract, it will be a plan. If this is stirring something in you, stay with it, there is a clear next step waiting, and the next message will show how to take it. The kitchen light is thin that morning, pooling on the table where the old ledger lies open like a confession. You trace the inked columns, dates, small defeats, the tight handwriting of someone who learned to hide bills in shoeboxes instead of dreams, and the house smells of coffee and decades of we couldn't. A phone buzzes, it's your sister, the familiar cadence of caution, don't risk it, remember what happened to Uncle Marco. Her voice carries the gravity of family history, a carefulness that kept them safe and small. You feel the old pulley of shame wind tighter around your chest. The ledger feels heavier. Then the voice arrives, not loud, not condemning, but clear enough to make you pause. What you call scarcity is a story you've been taught, it says, as if reading the margins of your life. The words land like warm light on cold paper. You want to argue, you want to point to bills, to reality. You open your mouth and the ledger closes itself, as if asking you to look again. Your worth is not sums and ledgers, the voice continues. Money is a tool. Let it serve your purpose, not define it. You remember your father counting change at the counter, the way his hands trembled when he spoke about investment as if it were blasphemy. You stand in front of the family photograph nailed to the wall, faces lined by choices they thought were safe, and something inside you loosens. The voice presses gently, forgive them. Fear was their shelter. Forgiveness frees your hands. So you try. You practice a new language at the grocery line, naming one small intention out loud, this is stewardship. You draft an awkward budget that feels more like promise than punishment. You feel the pull of old patterns, avoidance, minimization, the temptation to fold the dreams into neat, acceptable poverty. You hear a cousin's laughter at a family dinner when you mention the word investment and the old shame flares. Again the voice, courage is not the absence of fear. It's choosing purpose over inherited scripts. The ledger's pages begin to look different, margins fill with plans, seed money, a conversation to be had, a skill to learn. There is no sudden miracle, only a steady rehearsal, forgiving, reframing, small risks practiced like prayer. If this strikes a chord, linger here a moment, like what you feel, and subscribe to walk the next step with us. In the next scene, those small practices will be tested, and a path toward tangible, God-centered prosperity will begin to open. The kitchen light hums low as you sit with the old ledger across your knees, the pages smelling faintly of mothballs and Sunday sermons. Coins clink in a jar on the counter like distant church bells. A voice at the table, your mother's, your father's, the echo of a lineage, says softly, almost tenderly, "You know better than to risk what little we have." You feel the weight of that tenderness unfold into a rule stitched into your bones: scarcity is safety. You answer, quieter than you thought you would, "I know. I'm trying." The room listens like a judge. A different voice arrives, not loud, not condemning, like wind nudging a closed window. "Child," it says, "your worth is not written in ink that can be taxed. Money is a tool, it bends toward the heart that gives it purpose." The sentence lands in the quiet between breaths. You look up, the ceiling seems to soften. For the first time, you imagine money as something that can be used to heal, to create, to serve, not hide. Tension coils, doubt whispers, are you betraying your family? Will you lose safety? In the next scene, you try on a new language. You sit across from your sibling and speak with trembling honesty. "I forgave the fear I carried for them. I want to learn to steward, not hoard." Their eyebrows rise, old patterns resist. But the divine counsel continues like patient weather, inviting you to reframe risk as stewardship, calculated, faith-filled steps, rather than reckless desertion of caution. You write in the ledger again, in a different hand, worth, unchangeable. Money, servant to calling. Each stroke feels like forgiveness offered to ancestors who did the best they could with the stories they had. You practice a small discipline, a modest investment in a course, a conversation with a mentor, an act of generosity towards someone struggling, each one a brick laid against the old wall of fear. If this moment stirs something in you, promise yourself one small change today. I promise you practical, faith-rooted tools in the next videos to move from habit to habitus. If your heart is moved, press like to let this message ripple, subscribe and ring the bell so you won't miss the next step. As morning light threatens the window, the ledger closes softly, and beyond the porch, something in the line of your family's future begins to shift, ready for the breakthrough that waits just ahead. The rain taps the windows like a slow, deliberate metronome as you sit hunched over the ledger, its pages a map of long-buried habits. The kitchen light throws a pool of yellow across inked numbers and trembling margins where you once scrawled excuses. You press your thumb into the paper and feel, for the first time, how small those numbers have made you. A voice, neither loud nor distant but as near as breath, speaks, "These sums are not the sum of you." It is a gentle incision, a truth that lifts the weight from your chest and lets doubt rise like smoke to be observed rather than swallowed. You think of your father's clipped advice, your mother's quiet bargains, the way shame folded into family dinners with the same inevitability as the bread. The voice continues, patient and precise, "Money is not an enemy to be avoided nor a god to be worshipped. It is a tool you were given to build, to bless, to free." The words do not erase fear, they illuminate a new angle. You imagine money as light, not blinding, but directional, pointing toward service, toward repair. A memory surfaces, your younger sister asking for tuition help, your impulse tightening into no before love gets a say. You stand, palms flat on the ledger, and speak aloud in the empty kitchen, "What if I could change that answer?" The room holds its breath. The voice replies with counsel, not command, "Start small. Practice the discipline that proves you can be trusted by what you steward." The idea is almost laughable, a small envelope, a transferal of belief into action, but you feel courage like a muscle twitch beneath your ribs. That night you fold a single bill into a new envelope labeled seed. You place it beside the ledger like a pact. The act is simple, absurdly human, and terrifying. The ledger watches, and something in the house relaxes. You forgive the whispers that taught you scarcity, whispering, in turn, forgiveness into the margin, for them, for you. If this spoke to something inside you, leave a sign, a like that holds the echo of your promise. Subscribe and ring the bell to walk the next steps together, because tomorrow a test will arrive, and the path from practice to breakthrough will ask for a risk you can now prepare to take. Night settles into the house like a slow exhale. You sit at the kitchen table, the ledger open, the paper edges soft with years of avoidance. Outside, a single street light pools gold on the pavement. Inside, the light above you feels like an interrogation. The ledger is not just numbers now, it's names, voices, a grandmother counting coins into a tin, a father saying, "We can't afford that," and your own small, urgent promises to stay safe. The voice you first heard that morning returns, steady and gentle, as if God has been waiting at the edge of your fear all along. What if scarcity is a story, not a law? It asks. You answer with a laugh that doesn't quite reach your eyes. I don't know how to tell a different story. The room changes. Memory becomes theater. You see the kitchen where your mother weighed every purchase, the holiday when you learned to hide gifts, the whispered shame when a bill arrived. Each scene constricts around you until the voice says, "Forgive them. Forgive yourself." It's not a demand, it's an unfastening. You feel muscles you didn't realize you had relax. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it's choosing to unclench so you can rebuild. Doubt crowds in, what about risk? Your internal chorus whispers of failure like a litany. The voice counters with a new framing, money as a tool to steward, to serve, to amplify the life you are called to live. Would you rather hoard safety or build freedom? It asks. The question lands like a key. You imagine money bending toward purpose, investments that feed your family and your neighbors, a small business that hires the boy from down the street, a disciplined budget that becomes a promise kept. The ledger begins to look like a map, not a prison. You practice a small exercise, name one thing you can change this week, one disciplined act that speaks to worth. Pay yourself first, set aside a gift for someone, open the spreadsheet you have avoided. Each act is tiny, but the voice insists on repetition like prayer. The camera of your mind lingers on your hand, closing the ledger with a gentleness that feels like commitment. If this lands with you, feel it, like the room growing brighter. Tap like to hold that moment, subscribe and ring the bell to walk with me into the practical steps God is preparing to open, the exact disciplines, the financial pathways, and the freedoms that will break the pattern in your family line. In the next moment, you will be invited to take the first concrete step toward abundance. The kitchen light is low, the ledger lies open like a map of old storms. You trace a name in the margin, Grandma's handwriting, the same cramped letters you learned to fear. Rain taps the window in steady, deliberate time. In the hush, the voice you've been learning to listen to speaks again, quieter than your anxieties but firmer than your hesitation. Start with one clean decision, it says. Make a margin. Give the first portion away. Learn to steward what arrives. You breathe, and memory rushes in, a mother's worried face, a father's curt lesson, don't risk what you can't replace. The voice answers not by erasing those faces, but by folding them into a new story. Honor them by changing the pattern, it suggests. Risk with wisdom. Save with discipline. Teach your hands to build instead of hoard. You rise and move through the apartment like a pilgrim charting new territory. The coffee maker hums, a plant by the window leans toward the thin light. You create rules aloud, as if to anchor them, an emergency fund of 3 months, a weekly review of every outgoing dollar, a small allowance for learning, books, courses, mentorship. You feel foolish and fierce at once, like a child practicing to walk. Your phone buzzes, an invitation to a familiar, cautious life, an old friend urging safety. You let it go to voicemail. Give first, the voice coaches, then measure. Invest in skills that repay your time. Be generous in a way that changes how you value abundance. You picture a younger you, shoulders hunched, counting coins in secret. Now you imagine handing a portion to someone who needs it, seeing gratitude widen your chest. The ledger begins to look less like accusation and more like instruction. Doubt arrives as a cold wind. What if you fail? The voice replies with a promise, not of instant riches, but of steadiness, habits that compound. You make a small bet on yourself, enroll in a course, automate a transfer to savings, send a modest gift to a neighbor. Your fingers tremble as you hit send, then steady as you close the ledger. Outside, the rain eases, a thin light threads the clouds. If this guidance is opening something in you, stay with it, like this video, subscribe, and ring the bell to receive the next steps. Ahead, the path widens, true breakthrough is waiting to meet your willingness. Morning light slips through the blinds and finds you at the kitchen table, the old leather ledger open like a map of scars. You trace a familiar column, missed opportunities, whispered can'ts, the quiet arithmetic of fear, and the house holds its breath. A voice, soft as a hand on your shoulder, speaks into the hush, begin where you are. You look up, half expecting a sermon, and instead hear counsel that is practical and tender. Name one number you can change this month. Save it. Give it. Invest it in your learning. The words land like small stones thrown into still water, the rings spread wider than the figure on the page. You imagine the scene, a modest spreadsheet, a bank app blinking green, the nervous thrill of transferring the first dollar into a savings account labeled future. Around you, memories, recipes of scarcity passed down from a grandmother who hid coins in jars, a father who equated worth with work, rise like ghosts. You sit with them and say, aloud, I forgive you for teaching me fear. The house answers with the creak of a floorboard, and a warmth you can't name settles in your chest. Later, on the porch, a neighbor asks what you're doing differently. You find your voice steadier than you expected. I call money a tool, you say. Not the judge of my soul. You explain the small disciplines, automatic savings, a budget that reflects values, a promise to tithe or give a percentage to causes that matter. You speak of risks redefined, not gambling, but calculated steps, a course to build a skill, a seed investment in a trusted fund, a conversation with someone who has walked the path. The neighbor nods, relieved for permission to try. God's voice returns, neither grand nor demanding, simply clear, build with courage. Be generous early. Teach these practices aloud. You laugh unexpectedly, the sound of someone relieved to be allowed to change. If this scene stirs something in you, hold that feeling. Like this truth. Let it grow into habit, subscribe for the next steps and ring the bell if you want the practical roadmaps to follow. Because the real test is coming, a choice that will ask you to spend, save, or give, and how you answer will write the legacy you leave. The morning light finds you at the kitchen table again, but this time the ledger feels different under your hands, not a stone to carry, but a map to redraw. Outside, the city wakes in ordinary noise, a bus sighs, a neighbor laughs, a dog barks. Inside, you breathe and hear the gentle voice you've been learning to trust. Reframe your worth, it says, and your pen hesitates before writing a new line, income as service, money as seed. The first practical choice is small and stubborn, an emergency fund, 3 months of margin. You fold the old phrase, there is never enough, into a paper sale and set it beside a newly opened account where your first deposit is made like a promise to yourself. There is doubt in your mother's eyes when you tell her you're changing how you handle the family business. There is relief in your own voice when you say, we will try stewardship, not hoarding. Her skepticism is a soft echo of the past, but you have learned to listen to fear without obeying it. You call a mentor, a friend who once left safe scarcity for thoughtful risk, and the phone becomes a bridge. Start with constants, they advise. Pay yourself first, automate generosity, learn what you don't know. The plan is ordinary, budget, invest, insure, give. But ordinary done faithfully looks like miracle in a lineage of lack. You meet with an advisor in a sunlit office, sign a small investment account, and feel your chest unclench as if the breath has more room. God's voice touches the moment again, courage is practiced, generosity is trained. You make a first gift, not to impress, but to learn how it feels to release. It is heavier and lighter than you expected. At night you forgive the stories that shaped you, whispering the names of grandparents whose fear became your inheritance. Forgiveness is not forgetting, it is choosing a different ledger. The transformation is practical and tender, spreadsheets that track values, conversations that teach children how to steward, a morning ritual of gratitude before calculating risk. Each new discipline is a stitch in a larger garment of identity, steady, generous, courageous. You are not finished. You stand at a threshold, keys in hand, the doorway into a new financial life open. If this message has stirred you, give it a like so this work can reach another heart, subscribe and tap the bell to receive the next gentle counsel that will guide you across the threshold. Dawn finds you at the crossroads again, but the ledger in your hands is different now, edges softened by the rain of tears and the ink rewritten with intention. The air tastes like possibility, the morning hum of a city waking up sounds like opportunity, not accusation. You remember the first voice that punctured the silence, the gentle counsel that sounded suspiciously like God, and you answer it aloud this time. I am not your ancestors' apology, the voice says, and you feel your shoulders drop, as if a weight you've carried through generations finally slips free. Around you, details come alive, the worn table where your father counted coins, the closet where your mother hid bills in envelopes labeled just in case, the old photograph with faces intent on surviving rather than thriving. You walk through each memory with a soft, steady courage. Dialogue becomes your tool. What would it look like to steward rather than hoard, you ask? To plan rather than fear? The reply is not a thunderbolt but a map, practical lanes illuminated by mercy. Forgive the lineage, reframe money as service, learn the simple disciplines of saving and generous investing. A small scene plays out, cup of coffee steaming between your hands, a notebook open to a page titled New Covenant Budget. You begin to write habit names across it: generosity, courage, accountability. Each name is a promise to yourself and to those who will inherit the future you are building. You practice a short prayer: use what I gain to bless, not bind. The prayer is not magic, it's a steadying ritual that rearranges choice into character. By late afternoon, you make a practical change: a phone call to reopen a conversation with family, a transfer to an emergency fund, a meeting scheduled with a mentor. These are small acts, but they are the architecture of new identity: steady, generous, courageous. The ledger closes, not with finality, but with a bookmark, a commitment to continue. If this moment moved something in you, I promise to walk beside you with clear, doable steps and spiritual guidance that turns insight into income and fear into freedom. If this turned your heart, tap like to honor the shift, subscribe to receive the next message, and ring the bell so you won't miss the practical tools we'll build together. Which family financial pattern will you choose to break?